Not My Family is a highly fictionalized, loosely autobiographical narrative that describes generational bad will, poor choices, financial malfeasance, and even murder. The generational craziness is propagated like a tidal wave, threatening to drown everything in the deluge. Secrets are buried deep in lies, pacts sealed in blood, the truth concealed unto death, just to exert some control. Personally, I hate rubberneckers. It's kind of like, or this book is kind of like rubbernecking. The 30-mile pileup or 30-car pileup on I-75. You want to look away, but you're drawn to the carnage. Join me as the protagonist progresses along self-discovery and she recreates her identity and she discovers how to go home again. Not My Family can be purchased at FeliciaBaxter.com or directly from the author. Just navigate to Facebook, look up Dale's Angels Inc. and click Buy Now for your autographed copy. Now, let's return to the podcast.
God of glory, Lord of love, hearts unfold like flowers before thee, healthy as the sun above. Now the clouds of sin and sadness drive our dark down away. Giver of immortal hands, fill us with the light. Fill us with the light. Oh, fill us with the light of day.
Welcome to another episode of TNFro Is Reading. Hi, I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. Well, this is what's on tap for this episode. We'll be going through several topics in no particular order. I'll gripe a little bit about not being able to record and publish the podcast on time, but what can you get? I'm doing all this for free. And also, this itinerary is in no way, shape, or form a true sequence of what to expect and what sequence the show is going to follow. Because as the writer and producer of the podcast, I can go in any order that I want. I just need to make sure that I cover all the topics. I'll be going through my podcast reboot because I do listen to about 3 or 4 different podcasts. And I want to just highlight just 1 or 2 things from each podcast that interest me. I'll go over the invites and disinvites of the 2020 Democratic candidate for election and the other shenanigans going on in politics. I'll be discussing Black excellence, praise for people that are just doing it. I will be discussing my additions to Chattabooks and what I've written and what I plan to write. I'll be doing again the TNFro Medical Minute, where I'll update some of the research items that I spoke about in last week's podcast. my daily affirmation, and then I'll end it all with a conclusion. And again, thank you for joining me for this episode. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of the podcast, Black excellence and giving big ups to those in the society and the population that are just making a difference and propelling us forward. Um, the first goes to a Dr. Carl Allenby. This is a guy that was a mechanic right out of school, and then he decided that he wanted to finally follow his dream and go into medicine. And he started as an ED resident at the age of 48. I thought that was awesome how he goes from fixing people's cars to actually helping them as far as coming in to the ED. And as probably as a mechanic, maybe he's used those services. So it's fitting that he actually is going into medicine and making a difference. Big ups to Dr. Allemsby. And then there is, on a sadder note and more solemn note, Toni Morrison, the author of Beloved and several other short works and a literary giant, passed away this past week at the age of 88. Um, I liked what one reviewer and journalist had said about her, that some authors actually use their voices to tear down, and Toni Morrison used her to build up and as a means to heal. And I firmly believe that. And I leave you at this part of the episode that I would like to use my platform and my voice, my writing, as a means to heal. It's not a means to tear down. It should always be looked at and taken in a positive light as a means to heal. That is how I would like to emulate her, and I would like to hopefully that was her legacy, to encourage people like myself to always write, to heal, to build up, and as a positive motivator for change. And we should all write that into our spirit. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of the podcast, Black excellence and giving big ups to those in the society and the population that are just making a difference and propelling us forward. Um, the first goes to a Dr. Carl Allenby. This is a guy that was a mechanic right out of school, and then he decided that he wanted to finally follow his dream and go into medicine. And he started as an ED resident at the age of 48. I thought that was awesome how he goes from fixing people's cars to actually helping them as far as coming in to the ED. And as probably as a mechanic, maybe he's used those services. So it's fitting that he actually is going into medicine and making a difference. Big ups to Dr. Allemsby. And then there is, on a sadder note and more solemn note, Toni Morrison, the author of Beloved and several other short works and a literary giant, passed away this past week at the age of 88. Um, I liked what one uh, reviewer and journalist had said about her, that some authors actually use their voices to tear down, and Toni Morrison used her to build up and as a means to heal. And I firmly believe that. And I leave you at this part of the episode, that I would like to use my platform and my voice, my writing, as a means to heal. It's not a means to tear down. It should always be looked at and taken in a positive light as a means to heal. That is how I would like to emulate her, and I would like to, hopefully that was her legacy, to encourage people like myself, to always write, to heal, to build up, and as a positive motivator for change. And we should all write that into our spirit. Well, welcome back to the part of the podcast. This part of the podcast, I think, is a little bit gossipy, or it's just like kind of like the cliff notes of the gabillions of, it seems, podcasts that I actually listen to. I actually did go and list them out, and I listened to, or subscribe to, let's get that straight, subscribe to 9 podcasts. But because of my day job, which I do like, don't get me wrong, it's because it does pay bills to a certain extent. But anyways, um, I don't have a lot of time to be able to listen to hour and 2 hour podcasts every day. And I do get stuck at one podcast in particular. It's The Read. And they have a Kickstarter campaign. If you go to kickstarter.com/project/157-667-7152 at Shopback, they do really cool things. They talk about, it's a man and a female, and they are the best of gossipy friends. And they do bring a version of events to you. They seem to be in the know about um, everyone's business, including their own. They are unapologetically who they are, and I think that's awesome. They are the podcasters of how I would love to be, with sponsors, and they are known and respected. Um, One of the biggest things they made a comment on this past week was Wendy Williams reporting on she uh, how she basically is not going back to her cheating of a bastard husband. They are very informative because they were speaking about how they hustled for a number of years before they landed this particular gig, and how even with this, their podcasting gig, how it's finally paying off. And this is the only thing that they actually have to do. And I thought that was awesome. I also listened, uh, because I got the idea from them to sign up for Fiverr, and I got my first two paid uh, writing gigs besides my book, um, just this past week. And some of the things that they turned me on to, like watching the entire last season of Game of Thrones in its entirety. I still didn't like the ending. The excitement behind the re-release of live action Lion King, how they are not going to watch Little Mermaid on TV, even if Queen Latifah is in there, and how all of us, despise cats. I'm not watching anything with a bunch of dancing cats, on the stage, even if Idris Elba and Taylor Swift are in it. I just can't do it. I ain't doing it. I dream to grow up to be as big as those fools. But anyways, I really like that one. I also listen to the Breakfast Club. Charlemagne the God. He's a cranky old black man, it seems like, and he gets crankier every day. Uh, but I do like the donkey of the day and his affirmations, and he was actually able to turn me on to Humble the Poet. And I'm still reading through the book, and I still, that daily affirmations is something that I take to heart or written into my spirit, and I find it very helpful. Um, I happened upon The Secret Lives of Black Women. There's a group. Uh, it's basically young Erica Badu, but they have their own thing going. I listened to the New York Times Book Club this past week. They had a compilation and an honor because of the passing of Toni Morrison. It was a celebration of her life. She said and they were right, how they built with their words. And you can hear the lyrics in her words. I also listen or have subscribed to Fill in the Blanks. And the only reason why I recently subscribed to that, even though I watch Dr. Phil every single day because I work from home, is because Oprah is going to be on one of his episodes. The Black Guy Who Tips, author stories through Kirkus reviews, even though their review of my book is a little bit lukewarm. I've taken it into my spirit because that's the only way that I'm going to continue to improve with honest critiques. This American Life, Dale Jr. was the first podcast that I subscribed to, and I don't think I've listened to it since the first one, but I want to get back into that one. Serial is a podcast following the student in Baltimore that was accused of his girlfriend's murder, and he's still serving like a life sentence. And the New Yorker also has, and there's a couple of others that I think I miss. Uh, Can He Do That is Washington Post podcast. Um, and then there is Noah. Noah's podcast, the comedian's podcast from his nighttime show. Um, every podcast has a similar theme. Most are informative, with the exception, and even uh, definitely Dr. Phil in the Blanks with Dr. Phil. But they give an aspect of society and of culture uh, all on their own, and they're very individual. Some are more hard hitting and a little bit more negative than others, but they also point to certain things. They point out the idiosyncrasies and what is wrong with society, and then they challenge us what to do with it. And they're just like books. Books can take you anywhere you want to be, but it's also a challenge of the challenges of the journey to get there. And that's why I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to listen to such a variety of art. Welcome back to the show, and now on to the invites and disinvites to the barbecue. Well, the road to the White House is paved with the bodies of different candidates, and it's getting thinner and thinner. I think a lot of the candidates won't even make this next round of debate, but they're standouts that I can truly that I'm still seeing remarkably 25, 26 candidates in, and now only a few are making a positive or making positive gains. I still like Pete Buttigieg, but just because of his name. But this week, Tulsi Gabbard has made uh, a positive impression on me. I think she stands out just because of her military background. And most recently, she's taken a 2-week break to go active duty for 2 weeks with her National Guard unit in Hawaii. And she says it pretty much straight up, the why of it all. I love our country. I love being able to serve our country in so many ways, including as a soldier, she said. And so while some people are telling me, like, gosh, this is a terrible time to leave the campaign, can't you find a way out of it? That's not what this is all about. It's about country. It's about duty. And she's never shirked her duty. And I think that is a woman, and a woman of standard in spades. And that gives her major cool points, if anything. And if that doesn't give people a boost to either donate to her campaign or boost her standing in the polls, I think nothing will. I don't think any of the other candidates, any of them have this kind of dedication, except for Buttigieg, Pete, when he had to go back to his hometown. Oh, I forgot what was going on then. Was there a shooting or something like that? And he had to go back as a stand to comfort his people. So both of these people, country, duty, honor, and I dig it. But then the flip side of that is who I would love to disinvite to the barbecue. The acting public of not public policy, but of immigration and policy, Cuccinelli. You think I would like his name, but how can you fix your mouth to basically reiterate and back if you had any point use public assistance that basically negates you from being able to get your permanent residency status in this country? Who would actually prop that up and be able to say, yeah, okay, I'm in complete agreement with that, and I'm going to pass that on? The country says, send me your tired, send me your poor, but it seems like they're still finding ways of further marginalizing and keeping people or so-called undesirables out of this country. It's like American citizen, you're getting priced out of American citizenship, just like an apartment in Greenwich Village. I just can't believe it. It's ridiculous. And then, oh, Jesus wept. Ethan Collette, the friend that bought the Dayton shooter body armor and an extra magazine to hold the extra rounds. What damn sandwich did he think his friend was going to do with all of that? Really? He helping his friend purchase weapons of mass destruction, and he said he didn't know what his intent was. Boy, bye. Really? Sometimes I just think that these guys or the judges are going to look at these fools and say, really, you didn't know? So we get ready to give you 25 years. Since he got capped by the cops, somebody going to need to pay for all of this, and you alive, so you fitting to pay. And whoever, I kind of go back and forth. Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile, a serial pedophile. And the only way where he got away with it for so long is because of all his money. He committed suicide last week in prison. They had removed him from suicide watch, even though he had attempted to kill himself not too long prior to that. And then he went through with it. And it points to just how understaffed even that maximum security prison actually was. But that is rampant in New York. I go back to the young man and all of those convicts in Rikers now. They had it on tape, them abusing that young guy. And nothing happened to those guys, really. And now you got this billionaire that kills himself, and now everybody's up in arms, and there's going to be an entire investigation. Well, good luck with that, because that's it's less that he's going to be on the taxpayer's dime, but it's just indicative of a system that is not there to protect anybody. They couldn't protect him from himself and him from the public, because he got off. And then he was not strong enough to stay in trial and to face the music for all of his crimes. I think he was a coward in life, and he's still a coward in death. But unfortunately, maybe his death will actually right a very flawed system. I don't know. And that's my end about who needs I want to talk to, and then the other part of who needs to be voted off the island, or who voted themselves off the island. So be it. I love to read, obviously, therefore the TNFro Is Reading podcast. But for those hard to find titles, navigate to alibris.com. Alibris.com is chock full of hundreds of thousands of titles at a reasonable cost. So navigate to alibris.com/TNFro for those special deals. Plus, you can also navigate to dalesangelsinc.com and check out updated daily deals at your pleasure. Now back to the podcast. Well, welcome back to the show. I'm still actively dreaming of Chattabooks and Wineberry daily, and I honestly believe that sometime in the near future, it's going to become a reality. So in the meantime, I'm still adding books to my Goodreads shelves to be read, as well as to my website, dalesangelsinc.com/store, where you can actually pick up these books in the near future. Priest Daddy by Patricia Lockhart, which is about a kid growing up where her father is an ex-priest, as well as The Yellow Book by Sarah Broom. It's her experience in the Yellow House in the eastern part of New Orleans, and how one day it was there and then one day it was not there. I still am always on my hustle. It is a full-time job trying to convince people to pay me for what I love. Currently I do work in Chattanooga for an insurance company, and I like the work, don't get me wrong, and I actually like my colleagues for the most part. I haven't want to throat punch anybody in a minute, but I'm always on the lookout for combining as many positions as I possibly can, so that I can actually make a living from writing. So there comes in sites like Fiverr that I found from the Read, as well as Vocal Plus that I found kind of by happenstance on Instagram. And I've actually posted and actually have made a little bit of money with things that I'm actually feeling. But what I didn't realize that, and I never capitalized on because I was so focused on getting into medical school, I stumbled across one of my papers that I had written while at Mary Washington College now it's University of Mary Washington. And I was shocked that I'm thinking that Janine Lentine must have bought it hook, line, and sinker, because I actually thought it worthy of keeping it, and I thought it was going to be just a bunch of unedited drivel, but it actually was pretty cool. I was actually shocked because this was written almost 30 years ago. But anyways, and I don't even recall my feelings when I actually wrote this paper. I think I was more excited that we actually had a computer lab at the time where we And we had those old school Mac computers, and I was more excited to be able to use one of the computers. And I thought it was so advanced. And now I think how those original Macs had the little screen with the little green and yellowish kind of screen, and how we had to sign up so far in advance to be able to be able to use one of those, and how some of the richer kids actually had their own personal computers in their room. But me and my broke behind, I would not get my first Mac laptop until I actually took out a loan from the University of Florida or the credit union when I got to medical school. And I basically used my transcription fees to be able to pay for it, but that's neither here nor there. And how I'm actually creating this podcast on another edition of another Mac. But I don't know if she ever suspected, or she was just shocked that I would actually have written something that actually halfway sounded kind of cool. And for the sake of time, I don't think I'm actually going to be able to read it all, but I'm actually just floored simply by how deep I thought I was, or but it just seemed like it was a prelude to everything that's actually going on now, 30 years later. And I would always just wonder what E. Cummings would have just think of the current status of the White House, why he basically was rolling his eyes during World War I, and he became a pacifist. I think he would be completely unimpressed, not only by the craziness of our current administration, but I don't know if he would be so impressed with the Democratic candidates for 2020 at this time. I think he would be completely unimpressed and would be completely buying a ticket somewhere else. But that's just me. But my paper, in fact, was based on my interpretation of next to, of course, God, America, I. I believe he wrote this sometime in the 20s or 30s. And it goes a little bit like this. Next to, of course, God, America, I, love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth, oh. Say, can you see by the dawn's early, my country 'tis of centuries come and go, and are no more. What of it? We should worry in every language, even deaf and dumb. Thy sons acclaim your glorious name, by gory jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum. Why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead, who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute. He drank, and he drank rapidly, a glass of water. What son of a gun. And this I write, oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain. Is that what drew my forefathers over here? Those spacious skies that they probably saw are darkened with smog, and those amber waves of grain have been trodden over to build condominiums. The forefathers of this country must have had so much pride to write a song about the beauty of this country. Where is that pride today? The Constitution, the law which governs all Americans, is based upon the principles of liberty and justice. And since the Constitution has endured for over 200 years, there should be pride in that fact. This pride should keep these basic ideals intact. But I ask again, where is that pride now? E. Cummings, in his poem Next to, of course, God, I, raises this same question. Therefore, based on evidence given by his poem, the foundation of this country is held together by pride. However, because of Americans' lack of pride, the foundation could crumble. E. Cummings used a political speech at its worst as a tool to tell the reader he is making a political statement. I really did not know he was satirizing political speech until the last line. He spoke and drank rapidly, a glass of water. But once I reread the poem, I found several instances where he brings about this point. For example, the first three or more lines he wrote, next to God, of course, America, I love you, land of pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early? He was overlapping different sayings and songs to point the overall discontinuity of political speeches, or how unfocused they are. However, when I analyzed what he actually was saying, left off that word, I realized that politicians say things or overlap seemingly unrelated events and details. But when a person looks closer, there is some inadvertent message of which the speaker is totally aware. And this is the case with this particular satirized rendition of a political speech. And the inadvertent political message that Cummings wants to relay to the reader, I think, is the lack of love or pride Americans have in this country and for what this country stands. Next, the best times in the history of this country is when all citizens had pride in this country. Those times are no longer here. Based on Cummings' poem, when he wrote, I love you, land of pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early country 'tis of thee, centuries come and go and are no more. I believe he meant he loved the time of the pilgrims, the prideful founders of this country, but when a person's eyes are open to today's world, those times and prideful individuals are gone. But I think about that because these pilgrims, Christians though they were some of the most resentful and restricted. And this poem is sounding a little bit too MAGA for me. I'm not sure. MAGA meaning make America great again, looking back towards a time when white America was beautiful. Why would he look forward to when that particular period of time? And I'm hoping that I'm misinterpreting this, but I don't know. It seems like no one today has too much pride in America. For example, I believe there is little pride left because of the foul, that should be FOULED. And though this is one of the richest countries in the world, there are millions literally sleeping on the streets. Furthermore, it seems as if no one is trying to rectify the problems, though Americans show a blatant disregard for this country. Other people in other parts of the world do not. Cummings, I think, believes that in other parts of the world, people really admire the principle that this government or culture is based upon. When Cummings wrote, what of it, we should worry, in every language, deaf and dumb, thy sons acclaim your glorious name. I believe he meant in every country, people proclaim the glory of this country, and one can go further to say people are expressing their admiration for this country by trying to model their own governments in countries like that of America. And I would go so much further that we have so much player haterism in the world that people are taking the extremes to emulate our culture, and we don't even realize just what we are throwing away or what we have right at our fingertips, and we don't even admire. And then their countries will be worth the admirations they give America. When Cummings wrote, by Gory, by Jingo, why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think they died. I believe he meant these people are trying to make their countries like our countries through bloodshed, gory, which means bloody, and massive loss of life. However, death does not matter because at least they died trying to make their countries like this country. The same type of patriotism, jingo, which means patriotism or pride, is demonstrated by the fighting of American Revolution. One really does not have to go back that far. In different parts of the world, the bloody struggle for freedom is going on today. And at that time, I don't know, it may have been right around the Tiananmen Square, but they're really heating up right now in China, again, in Hong Kong. The same type of patriotism with, one really does not, Those wars or battles give the impression of unsubstantiated bloodletting. However, these people are dying fighting for the same freedoms I have but are taken for granted. Therefore, the meaning of the battle itself has changed. Although mankind in general has many shortcomings, mankind still possesses redemptive qualities. Since Americans are part of mankind, Americans must have redemptive qualities. I say this because Cummings wrote, "Then shall the voices of liberty be mute." This particular line is near the end of the poem. Cummings presented the prideless condition that Americans were in preceding this particular line. It is as if he were saying, I know this is how you are. However, I believe that there are still people, voices of liberty, that have pride or care about this country. However, these voices of liberty are silent right now. First, mute in reference to this poem must be defined. Someone who is mute can be defined as someone who has something to say but just cannot put it into words. Second, most people just do not realize that they are in a particular situation until someone else tells them. However, when they're enlightened, they want to do something or speak up for themselves, but they just cannot form the words. These people are mute. Try to imagine having a cure for a deadly disease, testament to what I would actually do by going into medicine, or the solution to resolve a conflict that could lead to a war. However, you cannot formulate the proper words to relay these findings to someone else. These people are extremely powerful, I think, because if the barrier of formulating the proper words are eliminated, these voices of liberty could liberate America not only from its prideless state, as seen by Cummings, but from things that plague society. We have a whole bunch of marginalized people, not the haterade, not the hate mongers, but people that are marginalized that nobody is listening to. And I think if they actually had a voice or thought they had a voice, a lot of our problems and things that ail society and those that are marginalized, they actually have the formula or the means for themselves not to become marginalized. And you'd be shocked if you actually spoke to them a step-by-step ways to demarginalize those that are marginalized. The principles, liberty and justice, are like bricks of a foundation, and the basis of the laws that make this country is built upon this foundation. Pride is like mortar that keeps it all intact. However, if Americans do not possess pride, then what is going to hold the foundation together? E. Cummings' uncapitalized and unpunctuated style makes this poem appear insignificant at first glance. However, because this poem reveals a great discrepancy in America, and because this poem can be applied to other cultures for that matter, is of greater magnitude than expected. Yeah, it was a little rambly, but I think it did get to the point. Um, and I think I was actually feeling this subject, and I think this was probably a first glimpse into what I would actually be doing now. And it's actually crazy. 30 years later, this yellowed 5-page honor pledge signed document is a testament to what I would be vibing off right now, and I can't wait to share my craft with others. Well, as I become more and more and I get paid more and more to work, I get to practice my craft in many different ways. I've published my own book, I update my blog, and I also publish this podcast. But what's going to keep it all moving smoothly is when I get other paid assignments. Well, I wrote this copy for a very useful uh, cleaning device that I first became aware of when I stayed with a colleague of mine in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I had no idea that the company or they're manufactured right down the road in Dalton, Georgia. But it's uh, a very perfect addition to any cleaning buff or OCD person. It's called Peachy Clean. And I am going to read you the copy that I wrote because I'm kind of proud of it, and I thought it was actually pretty good. I'm what you could call a self-described scrubaholic, which makes my relationship with the Peachy Clean scrubber a bit eccentric, but that makes sense because a scrubber does have a personality disorder. It looks like a sponge, but kicks butt as a heavy-duty scrubber. The lattice work of the silicone gives it the feel of a sponge and allows it to hold soap and water more readily. It also gives it the durability that keeps it from permanently damaging your ceramic stove tops or scrape that unique non-stick surface on expensive cookware. And when it's paired with the non-abrasive disinfectant, it makes quick work of the soap and scum in your bathroom. And you ever notice that stench emanating from that sponge, like the dust from Pigpen and the Peanuts cartoon? It's the perfume made up of the byproducts of mildew and pathologic bacteria that are having a love fest in the sponge. The bacterial brothel, yes, I stole that from a different writer, raging within those holes and crevices of traditional sponges that make them absorbent are the condos of salmonella, slime-causing, smelly, dangerous organisms. But the Peachy Clean scrubber with that silicone matrix allows it to scrape off burnt food and particles, rinse away pesticides, all without leaving a sticky film. It is one of the best on the market and economical, with benefits of durability with pots and pan scouring, but also soft enough not to scratch up your delicate surfaces or bruise your fruit and vegetables. Repeat cleaning will get you about 2 or 3 months of odor-free, heavy-duty usage. It's so reasonably priced that you'll easily be able to replace it. And literally, it's locally sourced, y'all. It's right down the road from Chattanooga in the state of Georgia. For those of us that require an A-plus health department grade cleaning of our kitchens and bathrooms, this guaranteed odor-free scrubber paired with surface-specific cleaning solutions is the one to beat. So join other scrubberholics as we keep it clean and keep it fresh with Peachy Clean Scrubber. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome to the segment, TNFro's Medical Minute. And I apologize for taking so long to record this segment because I find that this is a testament to when a job or your day job can actually interfere with your passion. Even though it finances a portion of the passion, I still don't have as much time as I would like to gather my own thoughts, organize them so I can create. And also, I'm still experimenting with the format of this portion of the original podcast because this started as a part of TNFro Is Reading, but I decided a couple of weeks ago to actually carve this out as its own entity because I think, number one, it's a lot shorter than the rest of the show. But number two, I do have a blog specifically that speaks to uh, medicine and what I actually uh, keep up on because I read a lot of things between Becker's Hospital Review, the science portion of the New York Times, as well as what I get through the AMA and the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I would like to share those tidbits with you. And I've decided to keep the format of this portion of the segment just as a recap of the previous weeks. If I have any updates on anything that I spoke about the previous week, as well as 2 new topics and then a blurb about what is to come up. This week I wanted to touch on Legionnaire's disease because of the outbreak that's in the Sheraton Atlanta. But before I get to that, I Don't have too much of an update on last week's Tennessee Medical Minute. There has been no real updates on in a while, actually, about the higher incidence of cardiovascular disease in astronauts. But I am still looking that up. I will be touching a little bit more on personal health and precision medicine during this episode. So after I speak about legionnaires, I'll just get into that a little bit more. Last week, it was all over the national news. The Sheraton Atlanta was still shut down as of last Friday because they found a contamination of a bacteria called Legionnaire's disease. It had made several people sick. This particular microorganism is associated with pneumonia. It can cause severe acute respiratory distress syndrome as well as death. It can be linked with GI distress, where you're basically pooping out all of your electrolytes, including sodium. You can get your liver can be damaged, or you can get organism-caused hepatitis. It's associated with about 10% mortality, which makes it, if you already have, or if you're already debilitated or have some type of immunodeficiency, it can really take you out. It's diagnosed by PCR because of the specificity and well, it's very fast. But it is treatable if you're started on appropriate antibiotics, either levofloxacin, which is a type of fluoroquinolone. Cipro is more well known, Zithromax, or even doxycycline. And because of the presentation, it can be confused with like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and other rickettsial or tick-borne fevers. So you have to be careful and make sure the diagnosis is appropriate. And I spoke about this a little bit more because there seems to be every time I look up, there seems to be new companies that are popping up as far as these huge panels that diagnose food intolerance. Companies like 23andMe, Everlywell, that promote that you can actually submit a sample and be diagnosed with everything under the sun. And it seems like insurers as well as the laws have not kept up with this explosion. Where this actually type of deep-seated genetic testing has become more pronounced is in precision medicine, which is how you can basically individually tailor medical treatment based on genetics and some other markers for the individual patients. This is more pronounced in cancer care at this time, in particular of breast cancer. But now, as I stated before, there has been an explosion of this type of testing and avoidance as far as food allergens at this time. But I actually think there are other possible applications as far as individualized medicine as we become, and we should have already been here, patient-centric and patient-specific. You know what your genetic makeup is. You can actually predict the clinical manifestations and things that you're going to have to treat using environmental markers, coming up with a risk, and tailoring either prevention and also management. The biggest thing that I wonder is, what are we going to do with all this information? And that's what I actually asked in my last session. When we have these companies like 23andMe and Everlywell doing all this genetic testing, and this was basically asked since we actually map the genome back in the 80s and 90s, what are we going to do with the information? Is it going to be used for good, or is it going to be misused? And that's where the regulation comes in. I think if we used it for the good, for precision medicine as it pertains to personalized health as well as management of cancer and even the long-term management of HIV and some other disorders. Diabetes comes to mind. Um, this is the information that we have locked in our genome actually has the answers for how we treat it when the genome gets sick. I think it's pretty awesome, and I think the potential is so vast to help just mankind in general. I don't think we need to sit on it. We just need to keep updated and sift through all the information and apply it appropriately. And that wraps up this part of the segment. TNFro is reading. I wish that you would also join me next week as I not only reboot and expand upon precision medicine and in its applications to now, as well as the work that we actually got going on in vaccines, in particular the chlamydia vaccine. As well as the updates on the contaminated water in New Jersey, in Newark. Thank you. Now back to the show. Well, this is another part of the podcast feel that I feel in my spirit every single day, and I have to limit myself to how many affirmations that I include in this segment. But I guess you can't stock a podcast with way too much positivity. So here we go. And every day I think we should get in the habit of writing those positive things, those things that build your spirit or build up your strength. And these are one of those things that I should never, ever skip doing because the day will just be bad. I will endeavor to do no massive generalizations because most generalizations are not grounded in sound fact. I will keep an urgency for life, and I will not waste 1 minute of it. I look forward to the journey or my journey, and I will enjoy the ride. I will rise to any challenge with grace and positivity, and I challenge all the listeners today to write these affirmations into their spirit and endeavor to be positive. Well, that's it for this week's episode of TNFro Is Reading. Join me next time as I explore the world of books, my own writing, and the leaning or the, I guess you can say, the thinning of the road to the White House for the Democrats for 2020, who I want to talk to and who I'm disinviting from the barbecue. Also, pay attention to what's up next with Tennessee Fro, the Medical Minute. And as always, please navigate to www.dalesangelsinc.com to partake in those special offers, find out what I'm also talking about in special events, as well as follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You don't hesitate to direct message me, but you can also leave comments and letters at TNFro Is Reading at gmail.com. That is TEFROISREADING at gmail.com. No trolls, please. And I may actually read your letter on the air. And I'm going to leave you with this last thought. I'm grateful for the power of my mind. I let it find solutions needed to create positive change. You guys have a great day and keep reading.